Hey, real estate nerds, this is Alex Yoder with Pro Tip Tuesday, my favorite day of the week. And today I want to talk about this question of if my tenant is causing damages to my property, should I non-renew that tenant, or should I look at trying to evict that tenant? And this is a tricky one because many landlords, particularly those that we serve, have just a single property. There are, of course, investors that we work for, but a lot of you just manage a single house or, one or two houses. And so it's a little bit more personal. It's a little bit more intimate. It's a little bit less of a kind of arm's length business decision as you're evaluating some of these things, because there's a little bit more of an emotional aspect when you are a smaller landlord. But there are times where a tenant has caused damage to the home. Let's say carpet is shot, the home will need a new paint job. Those are really the two big ticket items in most cases. And they've been there maybe for a couple of years, and you're trying to decide, do I endure the pain of dealing with that now, or do I defer that cost? Do I defer that maintenance? And I think that for most small or mom and pop landlords, the choice is obvious. You're damaging my house, get out of it. But I have had so many times in the years that I've been doing this where we've reported these kinds of damages to investor clients, and very, very rarely have they instructed us to remove the tenant. And the reasoning is, look, they've damaged all of the big ticket items. Just let them live in their filth for as long as possible, and we'll deal with the brain damage of that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Now, this is kind of philosophical in the way that you want to handle your business and the way that you want to deal with your properties. There's also the consideration, of course, of, are these tenants a nuisance for the neighbors or a nuisance for me as the landlord or whatever. But assuming they're not a nuisance to the neighbors, they're not, destroying the exterior, so it's an embarrassment. It's just kind of interior damages that they're kind of, again, kind of living in their own filth. And so I guess my challenge here is really try to view, if you really want to maximize opportunity and return as a landlord and position things for success, you really want to separate as much as you can from the emotional aspect, view things objectively, view it as a business, and make decisions based on what's the best business decision as we kind of go through and into this. And I think that you'll find in many cases that there are times where you just let people live with the damages they've caused and defer the cost. Because if you look at the math over the course of whatever 5, 10, 20 years as a landlord or investor, in many cases that can make more sense. Now, that's not always the case. There are times where the issues are so egregious that leaving them in there is just going to triple the cost, But again, in many cases, by the time you find out about it, you're not living with these people. So they're going to cause damages. You're not going to know about it till after the fact, whether that's a month later or a year later. And so you go walk through the home, the house needs a lot of work, and now you're trying to decide, how do I want to go about this after you've kind of gotten over being irritated by it. So just some food for thought and some consideration of philosophy as you evaluate what to do when you have a tenant who's not awesome, and how to position things going forward. Again, do the math. If it's going to cost me $10,000 to do the carpet and paint, I have a $1,500 security deposit. The tenant's probably never going to pay me back for the balance above that deposit. Sure, I'll send them to collections if there's damages that I can legally bill them for, but I'm not going to hold my breath on getting that money. So that additional $8,500 I'm going to be facing either now or later. And how much more could they do in that situation now that the major items have been neglected or damaged? And what's the best mathematical decision over the course of my plan as a landlord? Now, if you're planning on selling the house in a year, this is an entirely different conversation. If you're looking at being a long-term investor, that's where things get a little more tricky, and you need to be a little more thoughtful so that you're making real wise decisions as an objective investor. Hopefully this was helpful. and could definitely be a debate, and is probably a little controversial, but I've seen these decisions made many times, and in most of those cases, dealing with that now didn't save the owner much money. If anything, it cost them more money, because now we're dealing with a turnover every year or two instead of a long-term tenant, because you're considering the implications of the turnover costs as well as you're dealing with that, not to mention rolling the dice with another tenant who could be just as bad. So just some food for thought. Hopefully this was helpful to get your brain turning. We'll see you next week.